Hey, everybody, welcome back to Eggs. This week we have a special guest, Becca Moros. Becca is a professional soccer player playing here in Salt Lake City in the women's or National Women's Soccer League for the team, the Utah Royals. In addition to her soccer career, Becca is the inventor and entrepreneur behind the Footy Board. The Footy Board is a tool that helps soccer players of all ages and abilities improve their skill and level up that ever important first touch. Get yours now or learn more by visiting thefootyboard.com. But now, to talk business, entrepreneurship, life, sports, and just a few short days before the Royals FC first match of 2019, this Saturday, April 20th, join me in welcoming Becca Moros.
Hey, Becca.
Hey,
Hey guys,
how are you?
Thank you for making the time to come in and talk with us. Really appreciate it.
no problem. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Give us a little history about yourself. You're from New York. Is that what I read?
Yeah, I grew up in New York. My whole family's still in New York. Brother
Okay.
and sister both live in the city. My
Like
sister,
New
New
York,
York
or like
City.
Rochester? Because you
No.
never. Yeah. Right.
Everybody says New York, but
I was born in the city,
Okay.
and then we moved out to the suburbs. My mom had an office in the city. My dad worked just slightly north of where we lived in the suburbs. So I grew up probably 7 minutes north of the Bronx,
Okay.
on mainland New York.
That had to be an interesting area to grow up.
Uh,
Do you like it there, or is it kind of?
it was great. I'm
Yeah.
super suburban, right on the Long Island Sound. It was a nice place to live, good public schools. We all went to public schools. My dad grew up in Queens, so he's a New Yorker from his early days. My mom's from Connecticut, so my whole family's pretty much in the Northeast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. When did you start playing soccer? Like, were you barely able to walk, or did you kind of pick it up in high school?
No, I'm 34,
Yeah.
so nowadays people pick it up when they're 5.
Right.
When I started, I was probably 7 to 8, which
Okay.
was normal. But yeah, I definitely had an affinity for it right away, and I got lucky with a pretty exceptional coach early on who had just tremendous passion, and I think that's why I latched onto it in such a big way.
Nice. Um, so you start at 7 or 8. You have an awesome coach. What's like the process from going from there to being a professional soccer player? Because you got the high school, you got college, you got everything in between. Is it just pretty much dedication and drive that got you there, or is it just kind of happenstance that it just worked out well for you? Um, it, Athletics isn't my forte. If you couldn't tell, I'm not a
I don't know what he's talking about. He's
right.
so hard on himself. He looks like a super athlete to me.
I played t-ball and baseball, and that's the extent of in all little league. I never played in high school, so that's my sports extent. So I don't really know how that all works, but
I also played t-ball, by the way.
oh yeah. See, we can have a little match afterwards. It's something I might compete in.
I do remember hitting the rubber tee with the bat, so wasn't my
Yeah.
strength.
So
But yeah, so I think most professional athletes can cite some influential coach and figure that they had as a young kid, and I think that that initial passion is really important for a child, because it really is about having fun. You play with your friends. You want to be good, but you don't even really know what
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 good
good
is
is,
yet?
yeah,
Yeah.
or what it's gonna take. So I remember always wanting to be great, be the best, but if you had asked me what that meant, I really wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known
Sure.
how many kids in my area were playing. I wouldn't have known how many kids in New York were playing. I wouldn't have known, how good I had to be to come out of our region as a top player or to be recognized in the whole country. So it's kind of a very vague thing as a little kid, and that's why I think that first sort of coach somewhere when you're young and impressionable is so important, because you've got to commit and just keep recommitting every day. And if it's
Sure.
fun, that's easy. If
Well,
it's
in
not, no chance.
in soccer, at least in the states, is fairly new. It's something that's been it's been around, but it's become popular
Well,
recently in
yeah,
the last few
it's
years.
definitely not European level of soccer
Yeah.
just yet.
Uh,
Not necessarily in terms of level and the way people are playing, but in terms of popularity. It's definitely coming around, and maybe I'm a little bit insulated because I'm like sort of in. But it has been fun, and maybe Becca, you can speak to this, but it seems like in maybe even the last 5 or 10 years. I don't want to say it's just because I started paying attention in the last 5 10 years, but it seems like things started like I don't know, beginning to grow. Maybe it was the US run in the World Cup a few years ago or whatever, but like I feel like that was the first time I really saw every major corporation and everybody like all in on soccer. Like they've always had, the Coca-Cola can that was, or whatever for World Cup, but I felt like that year was kind of the pivoting point where all of a sudden, nationally it was a big sport.
I think there's been a number of periods in American soccer development where it's kind of grown and climbed and then plateaued and then grown and climbed, and then plateaus again. And I think that we've seen definitely in the last 5 years another period of real accelerated interest in soccer. I think social media is part of that because you don't need just the big corporations to latch on to the sport. There's more people playing soccer than any other sport in the country, and it's now, the marketing and everything is in the hands of the individual and the individual players as well. So I know that's been huge for women's sports. Women don't tend to get the biggest endorsement, sponsorships, and media coverage. But with social media, I think the women's professional players have huge followings, even bigger than the men and their
Mhm.
counterparts. So I think that that's been a massive thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and it seems too that, there's been just a little bit of a resurgence, at least in MLS, where they're bringing in former European stars and things. And it seems like, at least kind of culturally here in the States, we really like the big name guys, like in NFL or in Major League Baseball or whatever. We like the big celebrities. We need our LeBron Jameses.
Mm-hmm.
And so when on occasion we can get a Rooney or get I don't know, there's 100 examples right now. But when we can get somebody like that to come play here, like even if they are maybe near the end of their career in Europe or maybe done in Europe, the fact that we have like a big name, I think draws people in, and that seems to have been kind of something that's changed over the last 5 or 10 years too.
For me, it was when the Sounders came to Seattle. I had no real interest in soccer. I never really followed it as a. I still don't, to be honest with you.
Slacker.
The only reason I know anything about it is because of Ryan, and he's got the season tickets to Real, and I've been a few times, and I still don't even know what an offsides is or how it works or any of that. But
I will say, in your defense, I can't spot an offsides to save my life. When it happens, I know it's happened, and I get the rule, but I can't see it. We go to soccer games with Spanish kids all the time, and they can see it in a second. They're like, "Oh yeah, offsides, offsides, offsides." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'll wait. I'll listen onto the radio, and we'll see what they say here in a minute. Maybe it will be an offsides. Who knows?"
well, it's like I watch football and I can see a foul or whatever, and I can recognize that because it's up my alley. Soccer I never really got into until recently. And when the Sounders came to Seattle, it kind of had this weird pull. Everyone was into soccer all of a sudden. Everyone was going to the bars and doing the pre-games and the rallies and the chants and the running up the street with the banners, and it seemed like a really cool thing. And I always wanted to go to a Sounders match, and I haven't gone. So one of these times I'm gonna have to get out there and do it again. But anyways, ranting. Okay, so you went to Duke.
Yeah.
That's where you went to college. You did 4 years there, and
Yes.
what was your degree? In
Psychology.
psychology.
Oh, so
Interesting.
she's losing her mind right now
Yeah,
listening to us
she's
rant
like,
about
"These
this.
guys are crazy."
I started out in math, but it was a bit of a challenge to miss class and then come back and try and
How is
make
it
it up.
trying to manage juggle that the education and the full time?
I hated it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was a normal day like?
Um, I think some people handle it a lot better than I did. I'm very singularly focused.
Sure.
I hate splitting my attention between multiple important things. Like that's torture to me because whatever I'm doing here means I'm not working on that other thing, and whatever I'm working on the other thing, I'm not
You're
working on the
worrying
first
about the
thing.
other project,
So
and yeah,
yeah, for my personality, that was just a hard thing. But a day in the life is just pretty typical. I mean, you get up, you eat breakfast with all the other at Duke. All the freshmen are together, and then everyone else is in a cafeteria on the other side of campus. We kind of had training usually in the afternoons. My coach was not a morning person, so I didn't have to do the
Nice.
6 a.m. training like a
Nice.
lot of people do.
Lucky.
Yeah, I was very lucky. But Duke is just a beautiful campus. Soccer fields are amazing.
Well,
It's
yeah, that's a
perfect
great
weather.
campus for coming up a soccer player, right? I mean, they have a good program, a nice, well-developed program, and everything, versus some smaller schools and things. They seem to do a good job with soccer out there.
Oh, for sure. And the
Yeah.
ACC is like the most competitive conference. Pretty much, it's held that title for as long as soccer's been a thing. So it's a good environment to play.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and like by that point, did you have some understanding of your career trajectory? Like, were you planning for professional sports, or was this to get you through college, or because I don't know,
Did
and
you have a
maybe
scholarship?
I had a scholarship.
Okay.
My parents are
Sorry.
both physicians, went to Ivy League undergrad and medical schools. So I grew up thinking that everyone becomes a doctor. and that the Ivy League schools are the only schools in the country.
Right.
Okay.
So I didn't learn about college sports until I was way too old for like a normal recruiting process. I
Sure.
just didn't know that was a thing that people did. There was no interest from my parents in getting a scholarship. There was no expectation that I would play sports. My dad is about as nerdy a guy as you can imagine. Sweater vest, Caesar do,
Nice.
glasses, and that's all year round.
That's what I
So
want out of my doctors, though. To be perfectly honest, it's perfect.
yeah, so he had no intentions of raising a jock, as he likes to put it.
Right.
And even that word sounds funny coming out of his mouth. So, I mean, Duke was a pretty perfect mix for,
Sure.
my upbringing and what I thought college was supposed to be from what my parents had instilled in us, and then my desire to play, competitive soccer. My dad was appalled that I would consider a bunch of other schools
Yeah.
when I had a Duke available.
Sure.
Um,
So
but yeah.
did you have the scholarship going into it, or did you walk on and get the scholarship?
No, I had a scholarship going, a partial scholarship to start, and then increase
Nice.
the next year. But yeah, that wasn't. You know, I picked for the education,
Sure.
Yeah.
just knowing that
Right.
you can always get injured, and there was no professional
Yeah,
soccer
sure. I
league.
mean, I guess professional sports is a long shot, and also, I mean, the period of time you're going through this, I mean, like women's sports, even though they've been around in one form or another, like, I mean, they're gaining legitimacy now. So we're starting to feel good about women's sports and the future of women's sports. But back then, even just 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was totally a different world for women. And so maybe there wasn't a clear line to professional sports for you.
There wasn't.
And so it makes sense that you might choose based on education. So because they didn't know, or
Yeah.
or at least if you even did wind up professional at the time, how could you possibly get paid for it or make a living doing it?
Yeah, I mean, my parents were extremely supportive. They were big believers in hard work. Whatever you commit to, you
You do.
commit fully, and you apply yourself, and you think for yourself, and you work on things. So they definitely approved of my approach to soccer and my attitude, and have, you know, my dad's probably my biggest fan, even though he never played sports,
Sure.
not much. And my mom didn't get to play sports growing up because she's almost 70, and that just
It
wasn't.
wasn't
Wasn't the
around.
thing then,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
she swam, and that's what everybody kind of did at the beach and
Sure.
whatnot. But she didn't compete on the field or court or anything.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then, I guess as your career or potential career, advanced and you started working your way through school, like, I guess what did that transition look like when we started going from college sports to now? Do we get into professional sports right away, or are you working at KFC while you are practicing on the weekends? Like, how does that work? Because like you said, the
Yeah.
women's league was very underdeveloped at that moment. Not to mention just how difficult it would have been to survive doing it. Like, what does that transition look like for you coming out of school?
I was going to leave school a little bit early, graduating, but just leave a little early. My teachers are going to work with me to go play in Sweden for a coach, Pia Sundaga, who then later became, the U.S. national team coach.
Mhm.
But before I was heading there, she got picked up by the Chinese national team to go assist them through an Olympics. And so that team pretty much fell apart when they lost kind of that pivotal leader.
Were women's sports further along in Europe? Just, I mean, since you bring up Sweden, I mean, I'm thinking of things in the context of here, but I know you played in Japan and some other places as well. Like, were European women leagues more advanced or further along in sort of their evolution or their development than we were out here in the States?
We had one failed league at this point, so we had tried to launch a league, the WSA, on the heels of the '99 World Cup, and that they spent a fair amount of money. It was not sustainable, and they folded that league within 3 years.
Oh, wow.
A number of leagues, including in Japan, Germany, Sweden, Norway. I'm not sure who else, but they had leagues that lasted a long time and had been around for a while. And some of that is because there's no college sports.
Oh, okay.
The superstar effect is definitely different there. Sports in the United States are massive. I think that's why we do tend to get some of these, players who are at the end of their careers and they're big time players from the Premier League or La Liga or wherever,
Mhm.
and they do decide to come here for a little bit, even though the soccer is below the level of the leagues they're leaving. You get kind of a massive sporting experience
Sure.
in
Mhm.
the United States, and so I think that's always been a tough thing for women's sports here because you have to be larger than life to exist in American sports, and overseas some of these countries, the younger players were still in college while they were playing, or they're working, during the day and
Mhm.
training at night. So they had different setups where the league didn't have to be fully paid professionals. And they're also, I mean, their government and their, whole structures are a bit different.
Sure.
So I don't know what the support was for those leagues, but they were able to last for decades before, we were able to.
Well, and I think that's a good point about the college system, just that they weren't, doing our route where you go from high school into college, then college into professional sports. They're kind of circumventing that. And I guess even now they must do that to some degree because that's how you wind up with like these 14-year-olds playing for Barcelona and things like that because
Is
they're
there
just
seriously
they're
a 14-year-old?
circumventing. Yeah, I can't remember the guy's name. He's from like Sweden or Norway or one of these Nordic countries. But yeah, he's playing for them now. But I think they have whole school systems and everything. They're out of control. So, but yeah, really cool. So, okay, so as you're going and you start to go down this path and you start playing abroad, how does that wind you back to the United States? At what point do you end up here again? And what does that look like?
Washington Freedom had been a team in the first league, and they had kind of stayed and existed as a women's league team, and doing a bunch of exhibition matches for 6, 7 years, in basically waiting for another league to come around. So I ended up linking up onto that team out of college and playing with a bunch of um, players who were either former pros on and off the national team, or players like me who had left school, and there wasn't a pro league yet. We all knew that the league was in the works, with whatever variability that could
Sure.
could mean. So I didn't have the feeling, oh, I'm going to be waiting for a decade for a league to come around. I better go do something else. It was like, oh, probably be
Keep
next
working,
year.
keep training, and
It'll
there could be
be,
something soon.
yeah, another 12 months, and we'll have a league. And that's ultimately what happened. And the Freedom in Washington became a team. And so I got to stay there and play there, for the beginning of my career.
Great. Well, so I mean, I guess that experience playing Washington was probably pretty impactful for you. I mean, your first team out of college, your first step into professional life. What are the ups and downs of being a professional athlete? I mean, obviously you train a lot. I assume there's injuries and things like that along the way. But like, I guess can you talk a little bit about just sort of that experience of being a professional athlete and more and beyond that, even just being a female professional athlete? Because I think it's maybe a little bit different experience.
It was definitely an easy transition for me. Just I've always been a very intense and serious person, so being, signed onto a team with a whole bunch of other really competitive, intense people was an easy thing for me. The biggest sort of learning experience I first had was just having international teammates and some stellar ones who were just, unless you played on the national team, you weren't going to get to play against those players.
Mhm.
And even if you played on the national team, you weren't going to get to play with those players in
Right.
practice. But now they were on our teams. And that's when I first fell in love with Japanese football, because I had basically Japan's biggest superstar, their Mia Hamm was on my team in DC, and she was just lights out. I mean, it was like breathtaking.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so that kind of showed me, hey, there's another way somewhere. And, I like that way. So
Hmm.
I got to find a way to learn and figure out how do you get to be a player like that. So Washington was definitely, an extremely important first experience for me. And it was just a great place to be with a lot of really awesome
Well, and it
people.
sounds like you may have found your way anyway, just given your drive and your intensity and things like that. You may have worked your way through anyway, but I think that's really insightful that you could look at the experience of others and your thought is, I need to go learn Japanese ball. Look how hardcore this chick is, versus, just assuming you know the way or that you're the right one. Like I think being open to other people's experience is really key. So I think that's awesome. So from Washington, where did we go?
After my first season in Washington, I actually followed that Japanese superstar back to Japan and trained there for 3 months in the off season. And that just completely changed my approach to training. I felt at that point in my career that I already knew how to do it the American way. I knew how to be fit and strong. I knew how to work hard. I knew how to hustle. Um, I knew how to do a lot of things at a really high level, which most players by the time you're 22, 23, you should.
Sure.
Kind of have mastered this world that you grew up in. And then that basically opened up a whole new door of educational opportunity for me in terms of technique, and then the sort of balance of where technique and tactical sophistication allow you to create advantages for yourself. And that I really learned from being exposed to Japanese football. So I came back after that 3 month period in Japan and was transitioned to play outside back. because U.S. national team and Orlando Pride player Ali Krieger was supposed to come sign with us from Germany and be our outside back, and she ended up re-signing in Germany.
So you kind of defaulted to it, or
We had another player playing there. I was playing in the midfield, and she went down in like our first game of the season.
Oh no.
So I had to bump back, play outside back, and I was marking Marta in my first ever, game as an outside back, and she was the World Player of the Year at the time. So it was kind of like a sink or swim,
Sure.
and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a ton.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, like in baseball, if a first baseman gets transitioned out to outfield or catcher or something, it's a whole different thing. Is it kind of similar like that with soccer, where, switching a role or a position, do you have to relearn the game, or is it kind of like just this is my zone? I kind of do the same thing, but over here.
All the positions are really different.
Sure.
But the game itself is really fluid. So it's just kind of how you apply the same techniques or tactics. People do have strengths in certain positions. They don't transition to other positions that well all the time.
Okay.
Some people do, some people don't. Um,
So, what changed in your position going from midfield to outside back? Is that what it was?
mhm.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that I enjoyed was that I controlled the beginning of a play.
Oh,
So
okay.
I felt like I could get a ball from very early on and make a decision about how our whole buildup was going to start. Whereas when I was in the midfield, felt like I was at the mercy of whatever the people behind me decided they wanted to do.
Sure.
And at the time, we had, superstar center back from the national team, superstar forward from the national team. And man, they used to just ping balls over the heads of the midfielders the whole game long.
So you just sit there watching.
So I ended up,
man."
oh my God, I hated it. I was like, all I do is run here and then I go there. And then, I never
Yeah.
touched the
Every
ball.
now and then you might get to, yeah.
Yeah. So when I transitioned to the back, I thought, oh my God, I get the ball all the time. I can see the whole field in front of me. I get to make the first decisions and, could play the way I wanted to play.
So is it kind of like, you're passing you're setting up the play in attempt to eventually score a goal. It like how far in advance do you guys plan? Is it like 4 or 5 moves out, and you're that in depth, or is it kind of more just like on the fly? Or I mean, like I'm sure there's not knowing the sport and being in tune with it. I don't know. I can't see him setting up plays and seeing this or whatever. How in depth is it? Like break down like a common play that you guys do. Like
I wouldn't even say we ever have plays,
sure,
because it's just there's no timeouts. You don't set things up. It's much more about reading space and reading what the other team is doing and then what your teammates are doing. And that's one of the things about these teams like Barcelona. When you watch them, it's like they just have a sixth sense about where the other person is. And it's not a sixth sense, it's just an understanding of movement and vision and, watching their eyes and knowing players and what they do. And so the better you kind of understand space and have good timing moving in and out of space, that's when you can kind of accumulate movement up the field that turns into like an attacking opportunity.
okay,
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So obviously, I mean, as your career progressed, you bounced around from different clubs as we do, eventually landing on maybe your most important club, the Utah Royals. So how did you wind up out here?
You
You
know,
can you're also allowed to like your other clubs. I just have to bias. That's
I've
okay.
liked every club I've played for. There's been a couple cities I've ended up in that I said I would never want to play in these cities, and I liked both the cities, liked the teams. So, I've had a
Yeah, I
great.
suppose it's more about the people than the city most of the time. So
Yeah, and you have something to learn everywhere you go. It's kind of eye opening. So I've had great experiences. I have bounced around, but our first league existed for 3 years and folded.
yeah, it's sort of
Then
the
I went to
nature of things, I
Japan.
think.
Then I came back. Was traded a few times coming back into the
So,
league. So
Well, it
How,
seems like the opportunity for female players is like because of like what you're saying. I mean, the league was there, and then suddenly it's not, and so it seems like you have no choice but to kind of jump around a little bit. And like the trajectory for professional and women's sports might be different than like and not to say the guys don't bounce around too, but because the NFL has been there for 100 years, they were able to pick a team and be on it for a while and things like that. But if your
well,
team,
they still run into the same issues
yeah,
of being traded and this and that.
sure.
I mean, how does that work? I mean, one day you're playing here, and all of a sudden, oh, you got to play here next week. Do they take care of you as far as the move and all the other stuff? Is it pretty? I mean, that would be hard to just up
Uproot
and
all the
leave
time.
and be somewhere one year and somewhere else the next year and somewhere else the following year. That's got to be rough.
it can be pretty hard. It depends on the situation.
Sure.
Hopefully, you're getting traded into a city that's really excited about you, and the trade is because they do want you on their team versus part of some moving pieces, which does happen to people sometimes. And so, the club does a lot for you. I think it's hard to leave somewhere if you weren't ready to leave. But sometimes, I've been in both situations where I've been traded somewhere. Like when I left Portland to go to Kansas City, I was certain Kansas City was the right team in the league for me. Having
Sure.
watched them beat Seattle the year before in the championships, like they played my style of football. So I knew in that trade that no, I didn't want to leave Portland, but I did want to play for Kansas City. So that
Okay.
was, really a great fit for me.
So it was like it's sad to leave Portland, but good to get with a coach that plays your style and lets you do your thing, kind of.
Yeah, and then I got traded from Kansas City over contract stuff, and the way our league has been set up, it's sort of an interesting negotiation process. So I think that was just kind of the lay of the land. Like I got stuck in a situation where I had sort of no choice, and those owners were
Yeah, and
not the best
unfortunately,
people.
yeah, I think
So
unfortunately that happens to a lot of players. I mean across sports, but in soccer especially. It seems like that seems to happen quite a bit. I mean, I know that just watching Real since in the 6 years we've been here, all the guys you start to love somebody and then they're traded, and then you start to love the next guy and he's traded, and then it's always something. It's impossible to manage, and I think I don't know if it's just. I mean, I guess for the people who own the team, it's business. And for the players, you have this emotional attachment to them and everything. So it's got to be a little bit sketch or
you
a little
hope though.
difficult to run around. Yeah, I guess
That's
maybe not always.
that's good marketing. You you want the city you leave to feel sad that you're gone. So
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So here you are in Salt Lake. We're glad to have you. So I'm really excited about it. Talk to me about this season. So I mean, basically the women's league kicked off last week, but you guys had a bye, which I guess gets you a little extra time to warm up and get
Right.
ready. So nothing wrong with that unless it gives you guys jitters or something. So, but I expect you guys to come out swinging, and it'll be awesome. What are you guys looking forward to this season? What kind of things can we expect, and how are you feeling about the team in general? I mean, of course will have opinions you're not allowed to share, but what are your thoughts and how are you feeling about the team and how we look for the season?
Yeah, I think last year came with just incredible excitement, but with that and all of the moves and new people, new players, new coaching staff, new organization, new ownership, there are a lot of stressors that you're just kind of managing. This year has been much more like coming home, and I think that all the players have a certain like ease of transitioning back into Salt Lake City and training and our coach's philosophy and the way we're trying to play. That was all brand new last year,
Sure.
and it just happened so fast. So I think people did an unbelievable job getting us running yet last year, but man, that was hard. Like nobody knows what went on behind the scenes, and we didn't have a locker room when we got here. They had to build an
Huh.
entire locker room in like 2 months, and
Oh
it's
wow.
state of the art and beautiful, but it was still in construction when we
Sure.
showed up. We had to find housing. We had to move into a new city. They had to get people's cars here, people's things here. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just a lot in a very short period of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like, starting a new business or whatever. I mean, it's that first year can be kind of a rough road to travel. But it does seem like, I mean, largely anyway, a lot of the same core team is here this year. And so I suppose now with a couple seasons together and all that stuff, that's probably helping to make the road a little bit smoother this season.
Yeah, for sure. And I think our coach Laura Harvey did that a bit on purpose. We had enough, things to deal with last year, so kind of creating some stability and some core personalities and philosophy and style of play should help us this year. It already appears to be helping us. I mean, preseason is not the same thing as
Sure.
playing against other NWSL teams, so we'll get a good test this Saturday with Washington. But yeah, our on-field chemistry, everybody knows each other really well. The new players are fitting into an already established system instead of, everybody kind of
Everybody
figuring
figuring
out
it
on
out
the
at once.
fly. Yeah, totally. And that's such a big deal in soccer because you don't get timeouts, you don't get an opportunity to regroup, you don't get to change your tactics. Everything has to happen while the game is still being played.
Well, yeah, I think that that's a really good observation, especially for people who maybe don't watch that much soccer, don't know soccer that well. I mean, it's actually one of the things I grew to appreciate. I mean, as a youth, as a young man, I used to play American style football. Crashing into each other and heavy pads and all that kind of stuff. And so that was the type of football I grew up playing. But I mean, what did they say? I think I've heard some numbers recently that like over the course of a 4-hour ball game, you get 12 minutes of gameplay or something to that effect. And now in my old age and not dying to watch all these commercials every minute, like football's hard to sit through now. Like, I'll tolerate college football, but I have a hard time with NFL these days. And but one of the things I found that I just love about soccer is that fluidity and that nonstop action, and you figure out everything on the fly. And if somebody gets hurt, okay, adapt, move around and change. And I think that's so refreshing in sports, not just the fact that I get to dodge commercials for 45 minutes at a time, which I think is also pretty spectacular. But I think that that's a really cool thing about the sport. So for people who don't know it, maybe they don't even realize, but if you sit down and watch a soccer game, like you get full 45 minutes, and it's almost like watching a movie or a TV show, right? You get to watch sort of the story unfold. And like Mike was asking earlier about plays and things, it's not about plays, but like you kind of get to watch everybody kind of watching everyone and see how it works. And you're allowed the time to really build that up. It's not trying to outmaneuver somebody with strategy as much as it is, with fitness or with observation or with whatever, any number of other features. And so I think that's really cool.
So let's go down a different route here. We've got your soccer career kind of out there. We brought it up in the intro. You're an inventor, and you founded a product called the Footy Board. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is? It's essentially it's a training apparatus, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little board that you lay down on the next to the fence, and you kick the ball against it, and it just kind of the way it bounces back is kind of like what you would experience from a player. Is that what I got out of it? Or
Yeah, so the term for it is a rebounder.
Sure.
But that's it's more of a passing partner. So in a lot of sports, like if you imagine a pitcher pitching into a netted rebounder, they don't need the ball to come back to have any authentic training opportunity. It's all about hitting the target. In soccer, you're constantly passing and trapping the ball. I mean, the whole game is built up of passing and trapping the ball over and over again. And so having a rebounder that doesn't give you back a quality pass
Sure.
is sort of inauthentic to what you really need to do. And there's pretty much nothing that happens in soccer that doesn't start with your first touch. Even if it's an erratic ball bouncing that was deflected and a bunch of things happened, it's all about how you get it under control and start playing again. Could be a pass from your teammate, it could be intercepting something from another team. You have to have that first control. And it's something that's difficult to train in a big training environment because you're all kind of sharing around one ball. Like a game, I think you might touch the ball 100 times at
Yeah.
most. But if you're training, on your own, you can get thousands of touches, make thousands of decisions, figure out how you want to set up your body positioning to be able to see whatever it is you would be seeing on the field, depending maybe on what position you play or where you have a weakness in your game. So you basically pass into this wall as portable, and then you get the ball back, and that's sort of where you develop your body positioning, your awareness, and your technical development
So
as well.
is the board, as I saw it, it looked like it had a little angle on it. Is that design so that it's a random return? So you kind of have to go off of you kick it into this ball and it could go to the left or to the right or up in the air or however, so that you're
No, it has two angles that are built into it. They're suggested angles, so you can fasten the footy board at any angle you want. But it has two angles built into it, so very quickly you can set up for a pass back that rolls back on the ground, which is what you would ask for from a teammate.
Sure.
And what when you're coaching little kids, you're just constantly demanding that they keep the ball on the ground and they get the wobbles out of it, make it roll. And then there's a pop-up angle that brings the ball back, ideally over your head. So one of the hardest things about trapping a ball out of the air is the ability to track the ball above your head and then
and
back
watch it
down to your
down.
feet.
Yeah.
Because kind of what your eyes do when you look up and back down is they skip along. It's not like a smooth visual field. You kind of skip from each little level. And so going all the way above your head and back down is a very difficult skill in soccer. And you're not like when you catch a ball with your hands, you can kind of follow it with your eyes the whole way and get your hands pretty close to your face. Your feet can't get any closer. So there's a certain space between what your vision is taking in and then where you control the ball. So it's sort of built into the footy board to push that angle that makes kids and players track the ball through the air and then back down to their feet again.
Okay.
So we talked a little bit about it before the show, but as you were describing the footy board to us, it's basically a rigid piece of material. It's got some wood inside it. And because of that, you're getting a more natural rebound kind of feel versus maybe a plastic or something that flexes a little bit. Is that, I mean, obviously it's by design, but can you explain why having a nice rigid board is the most important part?
Yeah, so I designed the footy board by accident, so to speak. I very deliberately needed a wall for myself to train. I wasn't looking to invent a product. If somebody else was making a good one, I would have bought theirs, and the footy board wouldn't exist. I made it because nothing out there worked.
Sure.
I hate the netted stuff. It's like, your dad goes out to the field with you, your mom goes out to the field with you, they catch a ball and they sling it back at you. I mean, it's as inauthentic to soccer as possible.
Yeah.
Sure.
And they don't hold up. And then, some of the bigger rebounders that people make are just not portable. So for an individual user, there's just nothing you can do. You can't put a 50 pound,
Sure.
4x4 wall into your sedan and take it out to
Take
the
it
field.
everywhere you go.
No,
Yeah.
and a kid definitely can't. So I had, I was going back and forth from the field myself, and I needed something that fit in my trunk, and I needed something that could do all the things I needed to do with a wall, but it didn't have a wall at the field.
Well, and like if you had a wall at the field or at a gym, for example, you're not wearing cleats. You're not getting the real kind of feel in a gym versus on the field. So I'm sure
100%,
having
yeah.
that with you and having, being in the actual moment and trying to replicate an actual game or a practice environment is important. And being in cleats and doing,
It's huge.
Yeah.
And you don't always have a friend to train with. And that was the thing. I'd be out running fitness and need to go from the field to somewhere else to find a wall to be able to do something. And instead, now I could just throw my wall up and get all of my touches in and even incorporate fitness and a variety of things. And then if you do have a friend, you just have that many more things you can do together.
Yeah, because I suppose you could set up the footy board on one side, and then the three of you could sort of have interplay. And so, yeah, no, so I think that's pretty great. So for people who haven't seen the product yet, and we'll share it on the website and all that stuff, but like essentially, and I don't know the exact dimensions of the thing, but it's longer than it is tall, and very portable, like she's talking about. And essentially, and I think this is one of the things that's most innovative about it, is it has this cool strap system, so you can really attach it to like a chain link fence or whatever you've got available, and really make a practice spot out of some place that might not otherwise be a good practice spot. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the construction and the product and how you actually use this thing?
and how the development process came along. Like, what did it start out to,
Yeah.
and then what it is now?
It started out as a 50-cent piece of reclaimed wood from the Rebuild It Center on Mississippi
Nice.
Street in Portland, and some borrowed roof rack tie downs
Okay.
from my friend who's a surfer, and some odd end pieces to sort of help create the angles. It took a lot of just finessing. It worked pretty well quickly, which is why I kept working on it. And so I just, every time I used it at the field, I was just tweaking little things, figuring out better angles, better mechanisms for fastening it. And then I hired a designer to turn it into what it looks like now, and to make it a very efficient piece of equipment for throwing in your car and setting up. But it could be attached anywhere that you can, attach the straps. We highly recommend the chain link fence. Lots of fields are surrounded by chain link fences, basketball courts, tennis courts, they're surrounded by chain link fences. All the turf fields that they're building all over the country, warm climates, cold climates, they're fenced in. And the steel pole of a chain link fence is just in concrete, so deep down in the ground for safety reasons. So you basically have a 12.5-pound wall that operates like hundreds of pounds of
Sure.
material behind you, because you just can't move the steel pole that's in the
Sure.
concrete. So you could put it wherever you want, but depending on how sturdy the structure is you're attaching
Well, and
it
I
to,
suppose the
yeah,
more sturdier, the more rigid, the better the rebound, that kind of
100%,
thing, right?
yeah.
So, okay. Well, so tell us, like, so have you always been kind of entrepreneurial? So, because what I've heard as we've been unpacking your story here a little bit is that, you're very singularly focused and things like that. But for people who are entrepreneurs, man, that's a different skill set. That's two or three things or 100 things happening all at once. So how is somebody like you that's got this insane dedication splitting your personality up over all the responsibilities of an entrepreneur?
That's probably my biggest challenge.
Okay.
I think that I am so well trained for this. Like, I absolutely love this. This is the closest thing I've ever felt to soccer as far as, I go to bed thinking about it. I wake up in the morning thinking about it. I've got to solve all the problems myself, or find the person who can solve them, for me. And it's just competitive.
Sure.
If I fail, I fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what's so great about this thing is that it's, I mean, it's obviously coming from the perspective of somebody who's been playing soccer at the highest levels. Like, I mean, if I came out with some board, it would be me making judgments of what I think a soccer player might want and that sort of thing. And so the fact that this thing was born out of repetition and practice and trying to solve a real problem in training, I think is, part of what makes it such a great device to begin with. And but like I say, I mean, the fact that you've turned this corner entrepreneurially, but you're kind of applying your drive and your competitiveness to this product and the success of it, I think is kind of an interesting approach. Like I think it's different than kind of your nerdy entrepreneur. Like it's a different kind of thing.
I mean, I've always loved solving problems. I could sit and work on the same math problem for a half an hour. I mean, that was my biggest challenge with the SATs. You got the clock ticking, and you
Yeah.
just want to know the answer to
Trying to,
this one thing. But I just have, a lot of appetite for problem solving. And this was just right in my sweet spot with my needs for soccer and my belief in training. And I train little kids with the Footy Board all the time, and it's amazing how fast they learn because they're passing and receiving their own pass, so they get to be both sides of every transaction.
sure.
So it's the most efficient thing. And when I pass with a kid, if they give me something that isn't a perfect pass, I fix it.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they lose part of the feedback. If they're getting their own pass back,
They know
fix
exactly
it
what's going on.
immediately. Oh,
Yeah.
immediately. It's like 3 passes later, and they've got it.
Sure.
So it's such an incredible feedback tool. And you can manipulate things. So if you're working with somebody, you've got to ask for certain things from them. If you're working on the Footy Board, you can manipulate that yourself. So if I'm introducing a new skill set for myself, or I want to work on something with my weak foot, and I'm technically just not there yet, I can slow down my pass as slowly as I want, and I can make it faster incrementally, and just
Sure.
these minute little improvements, so that I'm not going from super slow to super fast and then going from 80% success to 10% success. Every step of the way I'm going up by 80-85% success. Okay, I move on to the next level. 80-85% success there, I move on to the next level. And that's how learning takes place. It's perfect repetitions.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like playing the piano, anything that you kind of require, you know, just you build up in slow increments, and then once you kind of got that mastered, you move on to the next one, the next one, next one. I'm sure it applies in soccer as well. Actually, I wanted to talk about. I was listening to an audiobook a few months ago called "The Talent Code,"
Mhm.
and have you heard it?
I've read it,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the part about the Brazilian soccer and the smaller indoor field with the smaller ball, I bet that kind of okay. Let me break that down for people who haven't read it. Um, he talks about a coach in Brazil who would they had a smaller ball and they did it indoors and it was a smaller court, and so everyone had more uh, plays going. It's a faster rate than a normal soccer match, right? And because of that, they developed their skills quicker and were able to advance and became better soccer players. I'm sure with the footy board, it's kind of the same thought process, same kind of thing. You get the repetitions over and over and over again at a quicker pace, so your skill level goes up faster. Do you have any insight on that, or any kind of? I mean, you read the book, you know what I'm getting at. I slaughter it at trying to get it out.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
And that's, I think the United States has recognized and aspired to do a little bit more training in the way that the Brazilians do and some of the other more technical countries. But it's a hard thing to just kind of copy and do a good job of. But yeah, they play a lot of futsal in Japan, and
That's what it's
I mean
called.
Japan
Yeah.
also. Yeah, Brazil, Japan. I think pretty much everywhere in the world they're playing futsal
So
now.
break that down. Is it just a smaller
It's a
board? Is it
smaller ball. It's a little bit denser so that it doesn't bounce the way it does, the way a regular soccer ball would on a hard floor. So it's a much more skillful game. You can't chip the ball up in the air. It's not going crazy off of walls or anything like that. There's lines and out of bounds, so the play does stop, and you have to be skillful enough to keep the ball on the court. And it's a smaller space, fewer numbers on the field. So I mean, imagine basketball is 5v5, but you probably play a ton of 2v2s and 3v3s and half court games and stuff like that in training to get more repetitions. And so futsal kind of has that smaller numbers, and so everyone is playing much more. I think one of the things that disadvantages us in the United States is we do have such a big country with so much space and resource
sure?
that even 8-year-old kids are playing on these massive fields, and it just means they touch the ball less.
Yeah.
They have less opportunities to make decisions, less interactions with the defenders, longer distances where they can't move the ball as well or as quickly. So playing in small spaces is I mean, it's the best sort of training for your mind and your decision making.
Reaction time, all the
100%.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because like both my kids play youth soccer, and now they're getting a little bit older, so it's become real soccer. But for the longest time, like even our 8-year-old, up until well, God, even this year, they still don't have them throwing in. Like for example, they'll stand on the sideline and kick it in instead of throwing it in. And when my wife used to coach for her, because she played soccer all the way up to college, for her it was no, teach the kids how to play the game. I mean, these kids are capable of throwing a ball over their head. Like I mean, come on, let's teach them the game. But that's how they do it in these programs, and so they're not really setting the kids up that well. And then like you're saying, they play on these massive fields, so you go from playing bunch ball where everybody is right on top of each other and they're just all killing one another, and then as they age up a little bit, now all of a sudden they're kicking the ball 30 yards at a time or whatever, and it's really difficult for these little legs to keep up, and so they get tired fast. They're not getting that many touches, and they're not having to really improve their technique at all. It's just who's fastest or who is near most near the goal. My youngest son is notorious for kind of camping out kind of near the goal, and then he's excellent at putting them in all the time. So he feels like he's a superstar, but he's really just kind of hanging out, letting all those guys do the work.
Cherry
And then,
picker.
yeah. So it's kind of funny. So and he's mastered all the the sort of celebration moves of the stars. So he's got Messi and Ronaldo and all these guys, and so he's standing out in the middle of the pitch, spinning around and hands praising God for the shot and everything. And so it's super entertaining, but at the same time, I'm sure the opposing teams hate us most of the time. He's famous for his he does a whole team high five where he runs down the sideline and high fives all the parents, but he gets both teams, so he gets everybody's parents, and so which I'm sure they just don't love, but it's pretty awesome. So he's a little bit of a showboat, that kid, but if you knew him, you'd understand.
Yeah.
So that's his personality. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, the process of taking Footyboard to market. So it started life as this little board that you found and a couple straps. You mentioned that you brought on a designer at some point to try and turn it more into a product. But talk a little bit about that process and this, taking something physical into market, because I think there are a lot of challenges that maybe people don't see until they're actually doing it, that maybe could be avoided if they were, did their research.
Yeah, for sure. Our first manufacturer was 50 boards handmade in Kansas City by a woodworker. And we had to figure out how to finish them ourselves.
So he just gave you the raw wood and you had to put the cover and straps and stuff on.
So we cleared out a garage, learned how to use an air compressor and a spray gun, and how to hang all the boards from the rafters and be able to take each one out and put it in the paint tent, finish it, put it back up in the rafters to dry. And then you do that with the primer, then you do that with every layer of paint you decide to put on, and then learn how to logo them, put the kind of like
The stencil
drill the pilot holes and put the hardware on, and there's a lot of learning involved. It was an incredible experience. I still use one of the boards from our very first manufacturer. It is in perfect condition. It's got dings and scratches, but just like your skateboard, if you're not scratching it, you're not a skater.
Using it right.
Yeah, you got to try harder.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I've never been able to break one. There's 3 different manufacturers, and I have one from each that I still use, and have yet to break any of them. So I love it. I enjoy it myself. I don't like it any less than I did the first time I used it. I only like it more and more. So um, that kind of first process of building 50 of them and doing so much manual work led me to find someone who could manufacture and bring them in from China. I had an arrangement with the Pug Company, which makes pop-up goals, for them to.
Oh, I was thinking the old pugs. Is that what they? Or
No,
pogs.
pogs.
Yeah, no.
Yes, from an old pog company, they transitioned into making Footy boards.
I don't know why that popped in my head.
Because you're not a soccer person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no.
But yeah, so this company that makes goals brought our next manufacturer in from China, which has been an interesting process. I like to be hands-on with everything. I like to talk to everybody who's I'm working with.
That's a good quality to have.
And our manufacturer came in with some defects, and we had to go back and fix those things. But now we're working to bring our manufacturing back to the United States, and which would be just awesome. We're looking at some new materials that would make these already durable footy boards kind of a lifetime warranty. So that would be cool.
What's the price point on one? Like if I was to go out and buy one tomorrow.
They're $250 right now.
Sure.
just because they're with
Cost
small
of
numbers.
manufacturing,
Yeah,
yeah.
like
Yeah,
we've
makes
never
sense.
been able to scale the way when I first made it. I hoped it was going to be like a $50 thing,
Yeah.
Sure.
and some experienced people were like,
No
chance.
chance.
Yeah,
Well, and honestly, though, I think it's all right. I mean, yeah, some of these things are expensive, but I mean, like you're talking about the durability and things. Like if they buy one in a lifetime, that lasts them through their 3 kids that are playing soccer or whatever, like you can't have charged them $50. You know what I mean? Like it has to be worth something. So I think that's great. And honestly, I think it speaks to the overall build quality and these other things too, because there's plenty of cheap solutions for doing things. There's probably a cheap way of making this out of rotomolded plastic, and some Chinese manufacturer would try and sell that as the product. But there's a difference between something like that that's kind of the cheap version of this, and something like what you've got, which is made out of good hardwoods, real durable materials and stuff. And that's what makes it last, and that's what makes it of good quality and worth the investment. And speaking of all the gains and things that you're talking about, the way that kids can mature playing with the footy board, that's totally worth it. It's cheaper than a private coach. It's I mean, and so I think that the price point is great where it's at, honestly. So not knowing that much about soccer, just that's my 2 cents for what they're worth.
yeah. I mean, if we can figure out how to do it more efficiently and cheaper, we will, because
Sure.
it just becomes more accessible to more people.
Yeah.
So that's always going to be a goal. But yeah, at this point, that's kind of without sacrificing quality. That's where we've been at.
Have you been able to scale pretty well, or is it? And like, I assume that having your background in professional soccer, that's kind of a good platform to be on to have a product like this. Have you been able to use that to actually build the company and scale?
We've done a lot of groundwork in terms of building the company, building that platform, building our marketing strategies and things. Our biggest issue has been supply chain and like
Sure.
not being able to have, reliably get product. So that's always left us in the position of like, oh, well, we're gonna run out. So
Yeah.
then what do we do?
And why
And
why push when we don't have the product?
yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, that's been our biggest challenge. And again, we're going to make another move to try to get a more sustainable, reliable supply chain, which may include manufacturing here in Utah, would be unbelievable. So that's a big goal for us in the next 6 months or so.
Neat. Yeah.
That's awesome. So let's talk, I guess, a little bit about the future of the footy board, what your sort of long-term visions are for it, and where you'd like to see it going. Who your prime customers are, and that sort of thing. Like, I mean, in your head, is this for like really young players? Is this for individuals or for teams? Like, who are you marketing to, and how do you hope to see it grow?
I think the youngest kids, it's a terrific tool, but they do need help getting out to the field, and either a parent has to do that, or a skills coach or something like that. So in terms of the youngest kid, I think that's while it's extremely valuable for little kids, just because of the feedback that's there, you just learn the right way, and then you don't have to fix all that stuff later.
Sure.
I think it suits more competitive soccer players, kids who are in club soccer, kids who want to compete at a high level in high school, maybe go on play college soccer. It is unbelievable training for pros. I mean, the most inquiries I get about the footy board through our email or social media is from professional athletes.
Well, it makes sense that, because those are the guys that are competing for that extra 1% of performance. You're already high level, but you need to be just that much better than your competitor. And so something like this makes sense. It also came to you a little bit later in your career. Maybe you'd have been stoked to have found one earlier on, but you finally made one. And so I think that should be applauded, that you went ahead and took that and made that. So it's interesting that at the higher levels, that's where it is. But if they got into it younger, maybe they could level up early on.
Yeah, I think every professional athlete knows, or soccer player knows, that training against the wall is a valuable thing. The footy board just lets you do more because of the size of it and because of the two different angles that are built into it. But a wall, if you have one, is excellent, and every professional soccer player knows that. So it's an easy sell for the elite players who need their extra 20 minutes of touches, need it during the off season. Maybe they're also coaching, and it saves your legs when you're coaching because you're not chasing bad passes or balls from kids. You
Right.
just they're working with them with the footy board. So it definitely has a huge appeal at the higher levels. But it's if I had this when I was a younger player, I would have been a better player
Sure.
earlier. I mean, without a doubt. Even
Yeah.
now, I feel like I can barely get enough time training against the wall to really perfect all the different things and keep yourself sharp, because you get rusty on certain stuff. Whatever you train is what you reach for. So if you're not training different skills, then you're going to stick to the ones that you're proficient at, and that basically come to your mind under pressure. So the footy board just helps you expand all of that stuff. So for kids, it's amazing. And so I think our market is pretty broad in that sense. I also have, I call them fantasies, but I think we're closer than it would be a fantasy. But I want these things on the fences in inner cities, in cities that have basketball courts, in communities, in parks and rec, schoolyards. I think these things can just be out there and accessible, and this next round of manufacturing is going to be incredibly durable. I mean, like lifetime warranty durable. So
Mhm.
Well,
if you just stick it out there, you can leave it there. And I think that kind of encourages that sort of pickup culture, that get the first kid out to play, and then somebody's going to see him or her and want to go
using
play
it.
too.
Yeah.
And then now you've got 1v1s, you get another kid out, and you've got 2v1s, you get another kid out, you got 2v2s, and before you know it, you can try to create that pickup culture that we've sort of had trouble building in the United
Mhm.
States in soccer.
Yeah. I saw a pickup game for basketball the other day, and I was shocked. I was like, oh, well, I haven't seen that in a while. That's pretty cool. I was going to say that the price point on it really isn't that outrageous. I mean, if you think about like baseball, for example, an automatic pitcher can be anywhere, like the pitching machine can be anywhere from like $500 to $1,000 or more. And really, for a $250 price point and what it brings to the game, uh, totally worth it in my opinion. Just it seems like it's not that overpriced to where it would price out of the
Yeah, I
thing.
don't think it's overpriced. I just think that the vision behind the footy board was to empower people to be able to develop on their own at the
Sure.
highest levels. So,
Sure.
you want it to be accessible to every kid, and not just your Christmas present opportunity.
Sure.
If we can get it into a place where a kid can just throw it in the car, take it to practice, get there 15, 20 minutes early, get their touches in, and then start training. I mean, that would be the most brilliant way to train, would to be have every kid using a footy board for 15, 20 minutes before you train, getting,
Sure.
1,000, 1,500 touches before you ever play. And now you go work on the stuff where you have all these teammates and you need all these people and you got to work on tactics and stuff. And then you already have that technical refinement to allow you to do that higher level stuff. So that would be, in my opinion, would be the ideal thing for any soccer player, is to get your 15, 20 minutes of really critical touches where it's just you thinking about you and figuring out what you need to do, and develop. And maybe it's coach guided. I mean, that's totally great too. And then going into your training sessions.
Speaking of coaching, is that kind of next on the board for you, or are you
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
going to, okay.
Yeah.
Are you already coaching, or is it kind of
I always coach kids in the off season. Sometimes more than other times. Last year was hard for me because the footy board stuff was just a
overwhelming?
lot.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to coach as much as I would have liked to. But yeah, I mean, I digest soccer all day long. I'm watching games, rewatching games. I love the tactics of the game. I hope to coach at the highest level. I look at my teammates and I'm like, man, if I had ever had the opportunity to coach players like these, I would be
Yeah.
in heaven. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just so
How
excellent.
does that process go? Do you have to kind of take on the youth league and hope that a college spots you out, and then kind of go from there? Or is it kind of, with your background, can you kind of walk on to a club level coaching job? Or
Yeah, I think there's a lot of positions I could walk into right away. Obviously at the highest levels, no, nobody
Yeah.
gets to just walk in too easily. Especially the more established the leagues are, it gets harder and harder to break in. U.S. soccer has really ramped up their licensing stuff, and requires certain licensing for certain levels. So that's only going to get more and more stringent. And so I've started that licensing process. Actually, Utah, our team, the Royals, had hosted the C license last year for all the players in the NWSL who wanted to attend. So they made that possible for us to get our C licenses last year. And so I'll continue on that process. It's kind of required. I'd love to go over to Barcelona or Spain,
Sure,
or go
yeah.
somewhere else. And I'd love to go back to Japan. That's some of the best football I ever played. So I would love to know what's behind their philosophy. Japanese is a little rusty now, so I have to do a lot of studying.
Were you
again,
fluent
probably.
at one point?
I wouldn't say fluent. I definitely had, because I was illiterate, like I couldn't read.
Sure.
I probably learned 200 kanji before leaving, but it just
Kanji's the actual text.
yeah,
characters.
yeah,
Character.
and I think you have to learn a few thousand before you can graduate high school, something like that.
Sure.
So
Wow.
I had a long way to go with that. But in terms of like the spoken language, I was pretty good. I'm a perfectionist. I would
Yeah,
like to be
same,
a lot better.
yeah.
Like I couldn't have talked about business, or I could talk about the joints in my body and my ligaments and things and anything that came up in a soccer environment and or everyday life. But there were plenty of subjects that I just didn't touch on when I was
Sure.
there.
Sure.
Well, it's hard. I mean, I lived in the Philippines for a little while, and just learning that language, you come across words as you need them, and then you figure out. I remember I was there when 9/11 happened, and that's how I figured out what the word war was.
Mhm.
Gira. Someone was talking about. Did you hear about the war? And I had never heard that word before, and he was talking about the 9/11 event, and it kind of was like, whoa, just an interesting kind of thing. But yeah. Um, so Ryan, what?
Yeah, so I guess to sort of put a bow on this thing, I guess let's talk a little bit about just where you can get the footy board. Also, let's talk a little bit about the kickoff of the season. We got the home opener this weekend. Anything you're really looking forward to, or anything we can be excited to see this week when we kick off?
Yeah, I think we'll probably have a sold out stadium. We did last year.
What's capacity there?
I think
22.
just
What did they do for you
20-ish.
guys? The whole thing,
Yeah.
22,000.
There's standing room, and I think
Yeah.
that might put you up to 22. I think the actual seating is just under 20,000.
Wow.
Yeah, they're playing at Rio Tinto Stadium, which is the same place where Real Salt Lake plays. It's the MLS stadium here in town. And I mean the environment there is amazing. I'm excited to get back into the women's league this year. We saw a few national team games and stuff last year, but I didn't make it to many Royals games, so I'm excited for this year. And but that'll be a big exciting thing. I guess outside of that, where can we get the footy board, that sort of thing? I guess I mean to finish that thought, you get your tickets realsaltlake.com, rsl.com, flash seats wherever you want, but go find some tickets coming out to the game. It'll be super fun. So, but now, where can they get the footy board?
You can buy online at thefootyboard.com. That's the only place we're selling right now. And, follow us on social media too, at the Footy Board. We try to put out a lot of useful content for training and training ideas. And we love to see the things that other people come up with training wise, and just kind of have that community of sharing ideas. And, it's really rewarding to interact with people and who are also passionate about the game and see how they do what they do. But yeah, you can buy it at thefootyboard.com, and I know you'll like it.
Yeah, yeah. I
Awesome.
saw a video you put out on your Facebook page, a little promo reel of it, and looked like a lot of fun. Looked like it just me not even playing. I think I'd have fun with it. So
Now's your time, Mike.
yeah, I'm
It's
gonna
never
go
too
pro
late.
next year. It's on my.
You don't have to be pro. You just have to be good enough to play in like an old man rec league. It'll be fun.
I'll kick my butt.
So cool. All right, Becca. Well, thanks so much. I do have to say, I have to sometimes stay off your Instagram because I see your little Instagram stories, and like you were saying, you're constantly ingesting soccer. And I think I had the Ajax Juventus game ruined for me because of
Sorry.
which made me. I mean, I was ecstatic because I'm an Ajax guy, so I was really happy that Ajax was successful, and then also the Barcelona match too. So I am always. My problem is I can never find time to watch the matches, so I watch them in the morning while my kids are getting ready, and so I watch them like a half at a time over 4 or 5 days. So when you're finally publishing your thing, or when I finally see it, the game's 3 days old. It's not like it's a spoiler, but like for me, I'm like only, in the 45th minute. And so anyway, so I have to kind of be careful when I'm on social media to make sure that I don't catch you spoiling the scores for
Sorry
me.
about that. Yeah.
That's all right. I won't hold you personally responsible. I realize you don't craft that content for me.
Not too much enthusiasm.
Right.
Good things happening.
No, that's amazing. So cool. Well, thanks so much, Becca. We really appreciate you coming on and doing this with us. It's been a little bit of a feat to make it happen, so we're glad we can finally get it scheduled. And timing wise, the fact that we got you just days before the season kicks off is really exciting too. So best of luck this year, best of luck this season, and best of luck with the Footy Board.
Thank you. Really enjoyed talking to you guys.
Yep. BeccaMoros.com, Instagram I think is Becca Moros as well.
and it's Moros.
Yep.
Becca Moros.
Moros, my bad. Sorry.
Yep, come on.
Yep.
Enunciate, child.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, and with that, everybody, thanks to the guys that tuned in on the live stream. Thanks for everybody else who will listen to this show later on today, because we're kind of late publishing because we're supposed to go live on Thursdays and it's already 3:30. But and yeah, that's it. So everybody have an awesome week. We'll see you next time.